Intruder. Real news, real insights.
To all Filipinos in the Cebu, Visayas, Mindanao, and the entire Philippines, and to everyone who are watching across the globe, maying hapon, good afternoon. I'm Ike Durano, and today is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025, and welcome to another edition of The Intruder. On top of our issues today, we're going to talk about the movement in the United States towards a unitary executive under the Trump administration. And the question now is that is the United States headed for a constitutional crisis? I invited my former boss and mentor, Attorney Wallace Francis, tonight here in the United States, and it's afternoon in the Philippines, to discuss and shed light on what's going on right now on the Trump administration and where will this kind of direction of Donald Trump administration bring this country into. So just for the information of our viewers, today, Donald Trump signed another executive order. He entitled this Restoring Democracy and Accountability in Government. Let's discuss this further, but let me first welcome my guest for today, Attorney Wallace Francis, a practicing lawyer here in California, USA. Attorney Francis, we're now live over The Intruder in the Sunstar in the Philippines and worldwide. Maying hapon or good evening to us here in California. Sir, thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for inviting me. I do appreciate it.
Yes, and it's been a while, Sir Wally. It's good to see you.
It has been. It's been a good 10 years, but we've been following each other on Facebook. So sort of like we never left each other's company in a way.
Yeah, Sir Wally, I invited you tonight in my program, and it's a platform we will be seen in the Philippines and all the Filipinos across the globe. It's an internet platform, and everybody is watching what's going on and what's happening right now in the United States. So I will go first to the question right now that we are so concerned about, Sir Wally, because the direction of the Trump administration, they first said that they are, like doing this efficiency in the government. And in order to do that, they're going to dismantle the federal government because that is the wise thing to do because it's wasting taxpayers' money. Sir Wally, what's your take on this? Is it not the task of the government to give services to the people? And why are we, is it savings or services that comes first, Attorney Francis?
Well, the purpose of the Trump administration in dismantling the government is on the surface designed to save money for the American people. But that is the fig leaf behind which it's really hiding. That the truth of the matter is that the Trump administration is not interested in saving money for individual Americans, and is not interested in saving money for the American government, and interested in shrinking the government. The Trump administration is shrinking the government because they are moving towards an autocratic state. And the more chaos that they can create, and by way of dismantling every aspect of the government, the more powerful the executive, unitary executive can become in that context. So the main purpose is, and this is a long-standing tradition among Republicans, which is this idea behind small government. It's been going on for decades. It's not a new idea. What is absolutely new and extraordinary is the way that he's literally taken a wrecking ball and used his power not only to shut down government agencies, but he's used his power to shut down government agencies that are funded by Congress.
Okay.
So,
Sir,
yes.
there's a question for that. Is it within the purview of the presidential power, Attorney Francis? Is it legal for the president to do that, or is it also because Congress decided to support Trump because they have the majority now in the Republican Party in Congress?
Well, I mean, you're an attorney and I'm an attorney, so we both know that in some ways there's not really this thing called the law. There's just kind of varying degrees of lawlessness, out there,
Mm-hmm.
and there's ways of controlling it. And so, and when we're talking about the fight between the executive branch and Congress is supposed to be controlling the purse strings. In the United States, they have the power of the purse. They are the ones
Mm-hmm.
that deal with all of that. So when the executive decides that he's not going to be spending the money that has been set forth by Congress, then he's invading the province of that branch. In America, we have three branches. We have the
Yeah.
executive branch, the president.
Mm-hmm.
We have the judicial branch, the judge,
Yeah.
judiciary, and then we have the Congress. And it's Congress it's their purview to determine what is funded and was not funded. And so it really is, I think, stepping outside the boundaries of a president to be not only shutting down these agencies, but he's actually refusing to spend money that's been provided for by Congress by using a term called impoundment.
Okay. Sir, what can you tell our viewers right now? What are your apprehensions, if there are any? Would we still have a democracy by the end of this 4 years of Trump administration? Just for today, he signed another executive order, and he titled it "Restoring Democracy and Accountability in Government." And he quoted Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution that cites the executive power as vested in the president, meaning all executive branches, officials, and employees are subject to his sole supervision, Attorney Francis. So there's no more independent bodies. Everybody have to confirm, to report, and be evaluated by Donald Trump. Attorney Francis, what's your comment on this? And then he just fired all the inspector generals and everybody, and there's no more accountability. I don't know. Like he labeled this accountability, but what's going on, Attorney Francis?
It's the opposite of that. He is basically, and to answer your question, I'm not engaging in hyperbole when I say that the United States is facing the most extreme crisis in my entire life. I'm 58 years old, and I've never seen anything like this. And I'm sitting here as an American who's not given to, panic. And I can tell you that in no time in my life has American democracy been more under threat than it is right now. And the Trump administration, its attack on the rule of law is something that is the most concerning. It's not just the attack on the rule of law, the refusal to follow orders by judges, the refusal to respect, the press and free speech. It's the attack on elections that is the most concerning thing. Is that and the attack on the truth, of course, which is
Yes, sir.
really the same thing. Which is, when everything is the subject of this fire hose of disinformation, which is a Russian disinformation technique, then nothing becomes knowable and everything becomes questionable. And so, an election which is clearly free and fair, if he decides it isn't going to be, then he can go ahead and he can put the story out that it's false. So there is a piece of good news that came out of Wisconsin today, which is that there's the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. Every state in the United States has a Supreme Court, its own body, and that there was a 4-3 split, and a Democrat won that election today, and that is going to affect the abortion rights and the diversity and immigration issues within that state. States
Mhm.
still have power in the United States. So there is some good news, but at the end of the day, the way that the Trump administration is moving towards autocracy, by taking over every single branch and taking, a wrecking ball to the rule of law, makes me wonder if there is going to be, a transfer of power. Because he actually just this 2 days ago was talking about a
Mhm.
third term,
Okay.
against the 12th Amendment of the Constitution. He's not kidding.
Yes.
We're laughing, because
Yeah.
we know that's preposterous. You're an attorney, so you know enough about that idea
Uh-huh.
for it to be ridiculous. But he's not
Okay.
deterred by the rule of law.
Attorney Francis, did you hear his explanation that he can have JD Vance run as the president, and then once they are both elected, he will be the vice president, and then he will kick JD Vance, and then he will become the president again in the United States.
Well, that's the first I've heard of that. It sounds like you're more on top of it than I am. And this is the kind of kooky thinking that comes out of this man's brain. This is not something that he thinks is impossible. But I guess I'm less concerned with him, and I'm more concerned with Vance, because I don't think that JD Vance would leave the presidency, and I think he's much smarter than Donald Trump is,
Okay.
and much more dangerous. So
Scarier, huh? Right.
yeah, much smarter man,
Uh-huh.
and a finger to the wind kind
Hmm.
of guy who will say anything and do anything, and so
Yeah.
that would be an interesting battle to see between those two.
Sir Wally, I would go to your you touch a bit about the defiance on a court order. I think this is something to do with the decision on the Venezuelans deportation, and he was like invoking a very old archaic power in the United States. And sir, though the problem is that despite the decision of the judiciary, openly, defiantly, the executive, for the first time in the United States history, no other American president have done this kind of defiance other than Donald Trump. And now, Congress, with the Speaker of the House, is pushing a bill to limit the effect of judges' decision only on their respective locality. Attorney Francis, what do you think will be the implication of this kind of move by the Trump administration and Congress at that, Attorney?
Well, one of the interesting things about all of this is when you look at it from a historical perspective, that there's this thing called the law of unintended consequences. And so one of the things that the Republicans and the GOP and the Make America Great Republicans believe is that if they create this unitary autocratic system, then they're going to be the ones in power. And that may not be the case. In fact,
Okay.
they may create a situation in which, the people they don't like, the Democratic Party, are the ones who end up in power and end up remaining in power because of the system that they've created, because they've destroyed the rule of law and the transfer of power. And in the same way, a judiciary, which is no longer federal, because the way it works in the United States is if one federal judge makes a ruling, that applies to everywhere in the United States. That's the
Yeah.
process.
Hmm.
So that would create a situation where a federal judge could make a ruling in favor of Donald Trump and that whole crew.
Yeah.
And then
Hmm.
a judge somewhere, like for example out in California, could rule a different way. And
Okay.
so it would frustrate the very thing that they think that they want.
Hmm.
And it's a good example of the way that they operate, which is they don't understand basic things such as having a relationship with Greenland and Canada the way we have now. We can have anything we want from them. They're our
Yes.
best friends. We
Uh-huh.
have military bases there. We have all the minerals
Mhm.
that they want. So Trump goes and he decides he's going to piss them off. Suddenly it's a problem now. Suddenly we can't get
Okay.
these things that we used to be able to get,
Mhm.
and so, a lot of what's happening is really incompetence, and it's like a monkey throwing shit out of a cage. It's, everybody thinks they're some kind of genius behind all of it. And
Uh-huh.
that's like not really often the case at all. It's more like he's just, spinning out. His head is like a jar of flies, with they're buzzing around and there's things coming out, and most people can see that, but not everybody can.
Yeah, I have a question on that too. Like, attorney, is it possible? Like, why is he so desperate on getting Greenland when, as you said, we can access it anytime? I've been to Greenland, Iceland many times because of the United States Navy, and all these countries in NATO had been giving us access to their territory.
It's it's a country of 54,000 people.
Hmm.
And it's this gigantic continent, so that they can't be defended. If the United States wanted to go in there and take it, they could, you know.
Hmm.
But the real question is why? Like, what is the purpose? And what happens is Trump sits around thinking about how he can become a great man, and he loves the idea of being this great autocratic leader who rules the world. That's why he worships Kim Jong-il and Putin. And, surprisingly, he's not cozying up to the premier of China, because he's that kind of guy too, where he just like,
Uh-huh.
they take what they want, and
Hmm.
everybody else, they can go to hell. So he just looks around at the world like it's his fiefdom and thinks, oh, like, wouldn't Greenland be great? Like, wouldn't Panama be great? And he might even occasionally look back in history and see somebody like McKinley, and this ancient history, those moments of American imperialism, which people in the Philippines understand quite well,
Yeah.
where there was kind of an American empire for a minute, and maybe thinking somehow that would be a great thing. There's not really
Yeah.
a lot of intense thought processes going on in the man's head other than, I'm great, how can I be more great?
Attorney Francis, what can you say also about his idea of creating a Middle Eastern Riviera out of the Gaza Strip? And in order to make that happen, you have to kick out all the Palestinians from their homeland and just put them in Egypt or in Jordan.
Because then you got beachfront property. Yeah, I mean, that really is a good example of the way the man thinks. Is he doesn't see people when he sees all of these people. They're just asking him about these American soldiers who died in Lithuania, and he was just like, I haven't heard anything about it. I don't know anything about it. He wasn't like, yeah. I mean, he could have made up something on the spot, like, oh, this is terrible that they died. We're looking into it. We're very
Hmm.
concerned. Hope their families,
Hmm.
but he has no empathy and no sympathy. He doesn't see people. He
Hmm.
doesn't see the refugees in Gaza. He doesn't see the suffering. He
Hmm.
just imagines this shining hotel and the people like him. And that's one of the extraordinary things about the Make America Great movement, is that all of the people who he despises, who he
Yeah.
would not share space with, who he thinks are disgusting and revolting, they're the people voting for him and putting him in power. And so that's kind of why he thinks of things like this, is because of this unique, he lives in this elaborate fantasy, and we're
Hmm.
all just props in his elaborate fantasy. And
Hmm.
it's a great example of how out of touch with reality he is.
Attorney Francis, so my question, sir, is you cannot just grab any nation's territory. It is criminal. It is against international law. And people are questioning what happened to America. America is the beacon of democracy. We are, the hope of, when all else fade during the Second World War, it's America who, delivered the world from tyranny, and give us, this the hope for like this liberty and democracy. And now with this kind of concept of Donald Trump, he just take anybody's territory because he thinks he needs it.
Well, you have to remember, a lot of this stems from the history of the United States, and we are really still in some ways two nations. And we
Hmm.
suffered a terrible civil war. 500,000 soldiers died in
Okay.
that war,
Hmm.
and still to this day you have people driving around with Confederate flags on their cars right next to an American flag, which is
Hmm.
very odd. you
Hmm.
know
Oh, that's
and
very visible in Virginia and in
yeah,
the East Coast.
Yeah. And so that war in a way never really ended. It just, they were defeated, but they refused to believe that they're defeated. So these white Christian fundamentalist nationalists remain, you know, in positions of power and authority. They remain out there, and Trump has given them voice. And so these are the very same people who would have no problem going into a place like Panama or Greenland, because they, again, they live in this fantasy land, where they never really lost the war, and they're going to come back and win it, and they're going to bring back this great white nation, to rule the world. You know, America has a long history of racism and imperialism, and you know, it's not a new idea. It's a very old idea. And these two Americas are at war with one another, and they still are to this day. So, you know, I mean, the term manifest destiny, I'm sure you're familiar with, you know.
Yeah. Of the white man.
Yeah. And so, you know, it was our job to civilize all of the brown people across the world, and to teach them, to convert them. And those views still remain very, very prevalent in the least educated parts of our country. And there is actually highly educated, powerful people who hold these positions as well.
Sir Wally, he mentioned that the military approach is not off the table. I served the military, and I'm afraid because we have the mightiest military force in the whole world. We spend a lot of money on the military, and with all these weapons and technology that we have, God forbid, no, I don't know if what's the possibility, Attorney Francis, of actually mobilizing the U.S. military in order to realize this crazy ideas of Donald Trump of taking over Greenland, taking over Panama, or any other country that he has any kind of, like fantasies.
Now, I'm going to sound like a lawyer here when I answer this. I'm going to say it's non-zero.
Okay, yeah.
Let's put it that way. That I think it's unlikely. I think it's cockamamie. But he has put people in positions of power who are willing to do his bidding. You know, the Secretary of Defense, Hegseth. He's taken a guy who was a major, I think, like an E5 or something like that, a very low ranking, like not to be insulting to the lower ranks of the officers, but it's like putting the janitor.
And the dude is in the reserves, attorney.
Yeah. They
oh my God.
He's putting this guy in a position of power and authority because he knows he's going to do what he wants him to do. He's gonna tell him to do it. And so if the commander in chief goes to Secretary of Defense, says we are going to invade these countries, and he tells the Pentagon to get ready, and then they go to Congress. Our Congress has been, a willing participant. I don't even know why these people want to hold office, because all they do is they're just a giant Stalinist rubber stamp committee for him. Basically, they do whatever he wants. And so, I remember very well when George Bush invaded Iraq. So a lot of what he's doing is actually designed as theater to try to get a reaction and provoke a reaction in some way. And there is some sort of thought process going in there. And I tend to think Greenland and Panama are more like trying to scare people rather than an actual plan, recognizing that I could be totally wrong. Wake up tomorrow and watching it happen.
Attorney, Donald Trump, one of his major moves is to strike out the so-called DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And honestly, that is a very hurtful, like definition, because anything that is not white, that is diversity. Like myself, you're serving the country, but you're brown or you're people of color. So, like you're as long as it's a white man doing the job, it is presumed to be competent. And if it's not a white man, that's diversity there. So that has to be stricken out per their definition. But I don't know how they define this DEI. I think you're well aware of what happened to that um, military plan leak on the attack of the Houthis in Yemen. That is a showcase of this DEI. The only qualification is not the color, but it is who's able to suck on Trump. Attorney.
Yeah. Well, you raise a really good point, which is that one of the things about the DEI, diversity, exclude, what does it stand for? I don't even know what it stands
Equity.
for. Diversity,
and inclusion.
equity, inclusion. Yeah, I didn't even know about it until the Republicans started making a big deal out of it. Honestly, it's like a lot of things. I don't know about any of this stuff until the Republicans make an issue out of it. But one of the things it's always designed to do is to create more competent people. And to make sure that people who are competent end up in more positions of power and authority so that things work better. That's actually historically been the strength of the United States and remains that way today, is our ability to bring people from all over the world, the smartest and the best and the hardest working people, all to live together in a multicultural society where we can join forces. And what we have is, a lot of mediocre white men, myself excluded, of course, mediocre white men who are out there trying to make sure that, they remain in positions of power because they've convinced themselves that by failing upward that they're doing so because they're so fantastic. And I can't think of a better example than these bunch of morons sending emojis back and forth on, Signal and sharing, war plans basically over a civilian chat when one of them I think is over in Russia while he's doing it, I mean, these guys, they're they could screw up a 2-car funeral. They couldn't find their butts with a flashlight and a mirror,
And this is not fair, attorney, because if it happened to be like, if you're in the military and you're the one who leaked this plan, you'd be court-martialed. You'd be in jail.
You'd be at what, Leavenworth? Is that the name of the federal penitentiary? Yeah, that's where you would
Fort Leavenworth.
Yeah, these guys didn't even get fired, And the Israelis, by the way, were incredibly pissed off because that obviously blew their source. As soon as the Houthis found out that they had all that information, they looked around at who was standing around them and they said, "Oh, okay, we got a spy." So now they've outed a spy. They've lost an important resource. I mean, the incompetence that which these people operate, it's not surprising, and that's one of the great things. If there's any hope for American democracy, one of the great hopes of American democracy is how incredibly incompetent and stupid so many of these people are, and the way that they function, on a daily basis, There's in some ways they're smarter than we think they are, and in some ways they're even more incompetent than we can imagine. And this is a great example of that.
Sir Wally, I don't know what's your comment on this appointees in the cabinet of Trump. We have Linda McMahon, Secretary of Education, and the only background is he's the CEO of World Wrestling Federation.
Yeah.
And Robert Kennedy, who is an anti-vaccine guy, and now in the Department of Health. And Hegseth, who's a reservist in your Department of Defense, and Pam Bondi is your Attorney General, who's into the controversy of, the Trump University in Florida.
Yeah, they're there to destroy everything is what they're there for. They're there to oversee the destruction of these organizations. And I do recall reading that was one of the things that Hitler did was he brought in all of these, mouth breathing idiots who, it was the idea was for them to be exactly the kind of troglodytes that we see here, because the more vile they are, the more effective they are in creating the kind of thing that they want to create, which is destruction. And that's actually one of the scarier things about all of this is the way that these people are appointed with with their fealty to Trump being the most important thing and nothing else. And that is one of the things he learned from his first administration was he brought in relatively competent people who knew what they're doing. And a lot of them said no, and a lot of them quit. And that was the result of that, which is he learned now that he's back for a second time, he's going to make sure whoever he gets, they don't have to be competent. They just have to do what he says. And the only problem with that is that he's got Elon Musk in tow now, the shadow president of the United States, who he can't really control in the same way. And is much smarter than he is and has a whole plan outside of what Donald Trump thinks is happening that is being executed. And
he made a 225 million donation. And,
yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Was
sir, with an example on Social Security, Elon Musk says it's a Ponzi scheme, and now they started like terminating employees that could take your services via phone verification. So now they required all the seniors to verify your identity online, and you have to schedule an in-person appointment. But because they don't have enough people there, your appointment is so backed off. And because of this kind of reality of the Social Security, people gets mad at Social Security, and perhaps this is the narrative that they wanted to have by the people, that hey, the Social Security is unable to do its job, so time to privatize it. Sir Wally.
Social Security is the third rail of American politics, and anybody who touches it in any way is going to get electrocuted. This is one of the things that gives me great hope for the end of the Trump administration, is the fact that they would be dumb enough to touch Social Security, and the fact that they're making these people wait. I think the head of Social Security at some point said, "Well, my grandmother gets it, and if she doesn't get her check, she'll just wait a couple of weeks." It's this kind of thing that shows you how out of touch these people are with reality.
And what they say, Sir Wally, that those who cry a lot, that complain a lot, are the scammers.
Right. Yeah. That's how you know a scammer is somebody who says, "Where's my check? I'm starving. I'm here eating cat food. So, I must be a scammer. I'm making that up,
Oh my God.
Yeah. The thing about, Musk and Trump is that they have no idea what it's like to be these people. They have no sympathy. They have no empathy. They're billionaires. They've been billionaires all their lives, rich people all their lives. Started out with maybe hundreds of millions rather than, billions. But they don't understand what it's like to be poor. They don't understand what it's like to lose your job. They don't understand what it's like to be fighting to put food on the table. And, their attitude towards those people is like, well, it's your fault that you're that way. It's your fault you're poor. It's your fault that, you didn't work hard enough. You're not smart enough. And that's evolution. That's the way it works, and I think ultimately this is a bad look for both of them. And I think that it's going to erode their support. James Carville said, all the Democrats need to do is sit back and watch these guys implode.
I think you've seen the Republican congressmen who are now hiding. They're afraid to do in-person town halls, Sir Wally.
Yeah. I think one made the mistake of doing it last 2 days ago, and it went exactly like, everybody was telling him it would go, which is just, Republicans are angry with them. Trump voters are angry with them. People are looking at basic things like my gas is not cheaper. Inflation is higher. Nothing is. Tell me how things are better. Tell me how firing all of these people in the federal government is helping us in any way. No American can see a difference between their life now than before. And that was how he got elected. Is he convinced people that he was going to get everybody cheap eggs, and on the first day of presidency, everything was just he was going to go into the Oval Office and he was going to press the cheap gas button. And then all the gas was going to be cheap. That's the kind of stuff that the Democrats didn't have the intelligence to be able to stand up and say, this is bullshit. That's not how it works.
Uh-huh.
You know, he's not going to be able to do it. And we're not able to do it. It's not how all this works. We're trying, you know, but
Uh-huh.
you know, why would you believe him?
Yeah, but that's what he told the people on the campaign trail that, Joe Biden doesn't know what he's doing. I am the best. I am the brightest. I can do, like I know what to do. First day in office, as you said, push the button. And
Yeah, right. You just get down in the boiler room and you fix the boiler. You know, that's how Americans see politics for the most part. The people who elected Trump have this boiler room mentality where you just fix it, get down there and fix it. Okay, I want my heat on, and Trump's like, I'm going to get the heat on, and Joe Biden is like, we're going to defeat Medicare or what, like.
oh my God. So,
Yeah.
Wally, the question right now about the prices of commodities, we knew that here in California, in the Central Valley, even in Napa and the rest of the agricultural sector, it has been the Latinos' backbone that has been working on our farms here in California and across the United States. They've been arresting people like crazy with ICE and the Homeland Security. There are no more Latinos working in the farms right now, and it's harvest season. Sir Wally, what do you think will happen to our prices in the groceries in the days to come?
You know, I just keep waiting for that moment when all of this happens, you know, because that's just one aspect of the whole part of it, everything all together, you know, like the
Hmm.
agriculture is one part of it. The deportation of immigrants is going to cause prices to rise. The tariffs are going to cause prices to rise. His decision to get in these trade wars with these different countries are going to cause
Hmm.
prices to rise. He's creating instability in the markets just with his haphazard, on again, off again terrorism of different countries that he's decided to bully. And thus far, I haven't seen it. And so it's sort of like turning a ship, I guess. It just takes a while for you to see what's
Uh-huh.
happening. But I am afraid that we're going to see exactly that, you know.
Sir, I will share your fear. Is this intentional or is this because they're just stupid or what? Like,
That's a
because
great question.
if this is
And
intentional, then it's scary, actually,
yeah.
right?
So this is a good conversation to have, because the difference between what is intentional and what is just idiocy is important. And when you look at Project 2025, which I know you're familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that it's created a huge list of things that they're trying to accomplish, the ultimate goal is autocracy and the elimination of the rule of law, and the deportation of immigrants and the economic collapse that would ensue would create the opportunity for Trump to move into that space and, declare martial law, and do our, if there's civil unrest, and that, so destroying the social net, destroying every aspect of the government that functions for citizens, and all of the upheaval that results, there could be that plan, which is to basically create circumstances under which he's the only guy that can save us, even though he's the one to blame. When Netanyahu um,
Uh-huh.
basically allowed 1,000 people to get killed because he was asleep at the wheel in Israel, he
Mm-hmm.
turned around and said, well, I'm the guy to save the day, and he's still in power over there, even though
Mm-hmm.
he's the guy to blame for it.
Mm-hmm.
He's directly to blame. He's the one that
Yeah.
funded Hamas and kept
Mm-hmm.
them in power. So big surprise. And Trump is smart enough, at least the people guiding him, smart enough to kind of understand that creating chaos can create an opportunity. Will it work that way? I don't know.
Yeah. And are we willing to give up like democracy for what do they stand to profit, Sir Wally, with this? Like, I don't understand. Like, America is the leader of the world. His promise is to make this nation the greatest. But right now, he's teaching the world to isolate America and to look for better trade partners, and I don't know what's going on, Sir Wally. Because the world, we already have like the green box. The dollar is the reserve currency, and it is capitalism. It's the economic way of life of the United States. That's the world is following, and that's why we have USAID, the goodwill of the American people. We go there, we give vaccines, medicine, food to the less fortunate countries. And
Not to oversimplify things, but there is in some ways two kinds of people in this world. There's people who understand that there's other people in the world, and that cooperating and working together with them in harmony makes their lives better. And then there's people who are seeing everyone around them as competition, and seeing people that they can use to increase their own individual lives. And it's a very, very unique way of looking at the world. I mean, not unique in terms of it's uncommon, but it's a specific way of looking at things. So a lot of what you see happening with Trump is not the worst thing about Trump. The worst thing about Trump are all the people around him who want a career and do not care what happens to their country. They do not see democracy as an ideal. They do not see the idea of making everybody's lives better. They see themselves as advancing their careers. And every one of them, from J.D. Vance to Pam Biondi, from Pete Hegseth, every single one of these people see it as an opportunity for them to advance their career. And they're perfectly happy to ditch democracy in order to do that. They probably didn't believe in democracy in the first place, or it just doesn't, they have got this kind of cynical view of it, which is like, well, what does it really mean anyway? Like, what does, giving a person a vote mean anyway? Is there really such a thing as democracy? We're really an oligarchy anyway, right? It's a very, cynical view of the world, and that's, I think, how I break it down, which Trump is. Trump is like, I just want more money. I've got billions and I need more billions.
Sir, how can the American people push back on all these things that's going on? I participated in the town hall of my congressman here in my district, Congressman John Garamendi. And while I know the guy was well-meaning, but I'm not satisfied with his position. And he said, like, we'll just have to wait for the next elections. And so, like, I don't know if we have the luxury of of the time to wait for that. Sir Wally, what do you think? What can we do? We wait for the 2026 and do nothing about what's going on right now?
The Democratic Party has ceded this ground to the Republicans, and I've never been more ashamed in my entire life of the Democratic Party. It's like, I think the saying goes, the Democrats, they don't bring a knife to a gunfight, they bring a covered dish. They just don't get it. They sat there in front of his speech with their waving their stupid paddles and wearing their pink clothes, and only one guy had the guts to stand up and say something, and then they criticized him. The one guy, he was the only guy, and in my opinion, that's the guy. And it should have been, every one of those people should have been standing up and rushing the stage like January 6th is what they should.
Yeah, on that town hall, there was a lady from Vacaville, and the lady was so mad. And like, Congressman, I want you to be mad. I want you to be fighting and in fighting mode. Represent us, like we voted for you.
Yeah, this is no time to remain calm. If there's anything to be said about the future of how this works, is there needs to be outrage. There needs to be people in the streets. And I'm 58, so like, I'm not going to be kicking any doors down and throwing Molotov cocktails.
Yes,
I'm going to be icing my back somewhere, basically. But there's a younger man out there somewhere, or a younger woman, out there somewhere with an inclination of what needs to happen. And there needs to be some leadership, some real leadership within, there needs to be a real opposition, and grassroots. There's an organization called Indivisible, which I'm sure you've heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm joined, and I'm getting emails from them, and they organized protests on Saturday across the nation. And I think that that is the way to go, that there needs to be civil unrest, and they can call it terrorism. They can say what they want, and I'm not saying that, I'm not suggesting that anybody go out and burn a Tesla, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And I will say that the more people that do that kind of thing, the more they get to look at people like me and say, well, maybe we can
Mm-hmm.
talk to him. Those guys are crazy, but we can talk to him,
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my take, is like sitting back and waiting is not the plan.
Okay. And Attorney Francis, I really thank you for this time and, all this perspectives that you have shared with our Filipino viewers across the globe. I sincerely appreciate it. And we have a lot of Filipino Americans in this country. And what matters to America affects not only the Philippines, but everyone in the world. Until now, like, America is the leader of the world until Trump, I don't know, will decide to let go of that.
Yeah, it's not looking good, but at the moment, as long as we recognize we have friends, like friends in the Philippines, and friends in, in Europe, and friends in Ukraine, and friends in Canada, what makes us great is our friends. Not being us doesn't make us great,
Yes, sir.
because all of our friends move here and live here and are from here, and
Uh-huh.
so thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate this.
Yeah.
I enjoyed being able to bloviate before you, and your poor listeners had to listen to me, but I hope I entertained some of them for
Yeah.
a brief moment.
And Attorney, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasant evening to you, sir. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
All right. I'll talk to
Maing
you soon.
gabi. Thank you,
All
sir.
right.
Okay. Thea, thank you. So that's Attorney Wallace Francis. He's a practicing lawyer here in the United States, in California in particular. And he's my former boss in the law firm. So when I arrived from the Philippines in 2013, yeah, morning ngita ng trabaho diri sa America fa. And so like I was his paralegal no sa iyang opisina sa Concord, California, mga higala. He's a Jewish American and a very nice guy. No, atong kuhaan sab og iyahang uh, perspectives, no? And iyang analysis on what is going on right now. There is Estados Unidos sa Amerika, mga higala. So, diya karon kining giingon nila nga Project 2025. And while on the campaign, si Donald Trump, mga higala, diingon nga dili niya dito wa siya labot ining Project 2025. But the ultimate goal of Project 2025 mao ni ang unitary executive, no? Kay ang sistema sa panggobyerno sa Amerika, it is established by the founding fathers, mga higala, on the concept and principle of checks and balances, mga igsoon. No? So doon ay kanabang gibahin-bahin ang gahong sa gobyerno because the founding fathers are afraid that too much concentration of power, mga higala, will create a king. No? O niya, kanang monarchy, mao ba ni hinungdan ng anong ilaning gihimo ang pag-alsa batok dito sa United Kingdom, mga higalas, Britanya, because they wanted a democracy, not a monarchy, mga higsoon. So mao na nga to prevent that possibility, mga igsoon, mausab na sad a repeat of history, mo ning ilang ning bahin-bahin, no? Ang gahom sa gobyerno, mga higala. But this time around, si Donald Trump, mga higala, had imihimo ni karon o kining iya nitong mga maneuvers. Mao ni ang ilang gustong mahitabo nga ang executive department mao ditoy buhimo, mga higala, pag duma sa tanan karon nga panggobyerno sa Amerika o niya disregarding institutions, mga higala, o niya siya na no, ang babahimo mga igsoon ang sole authority karon mga igsoon sa pagduma sa gobyerno mga higala. In short definition, this is now what we're witnessing right now is the transition from democracy to dictatorship mga kaigsuonan. O niya kining gingon karon sir asa man ang dapita kining ginganlan nitong constitutional crisis mga higala. So dunay desisyon mga igsoon ang usa ka federal court judge no diri sa Amerika nag-question mga higala dahil ila dito nga pag-invoke aning ilang gahom that was way back in 18th century. O niya motoy gigamit nga basis ni Donald Trump o sa iya nitong pagpandakop mga higala ngadto mga Venezuelans mga igsoon o niya gipang deport ni ngadto sa El Salvador mga higala sa usa ka kanang usa ka special facility mga kaigsuonan no? For kining mga complicated nga mga kasos mga kriminal dito sa El Salvador mga higala. I-question man no? Sa usa ka federal court judge mga igsoon as illegal no. Kini nga maong decision ni Donald Trump mga higala. Karong adlaw ang usa sa mga dako sang nigawas nga kalambuan ang Federal Appeals Court no may basura ngadto sa pag-apilar sa Department of Justice mga higala. So usa may mahitabo adto ni mo diretso mga higala ngadto sa United States Supreme Court mga igsoon. Kining maong kaso inig-abot ani didto. Inig-desisyon sa United States Supreme Court o niya og supakon gihapon ni Donald Trump mga higala og sa iyang tibuok dito nga mga sakop mga igsoon sa executive branch of the government ang decision sa United States Supreme Court mo na gingon mga igsoon nga that my friend gingon nga finally naabot na gyud ang gikabalakan o gikahadlukan sa tanan nga ginganlan og constitutional crisis mga higala. Kay maingon man o sa may arm karon sir no? Sa ato nga judiciary to enforce their decisions mga higala. Ang mohimo pagpatuman mga igsoon sa desisyon sa korte mga higala mao na ang court sheriff o ang US Court Marshals mga igsoon. US Marshals. Sa man mo sir kanang US Marshals under man usab dito sa Department of Justice mga higala. So ikaw mo US Marshal giorderan kas korte sa Korte Suprema nga mao na imo nitong ipatuman o niya here comes the Department of Justice telling you nga ayaw sa nagtumama kay dili ganin nimo sundo ning akong gusto. Tangtang ka sa imong trabaho wala kay sweldo. No? So this is a crisis mga igsoon because there is now a conflict o kinsa man ang dunay authority mga higala. Gustong mahitabo ni Donald Trump karon mga igsoon nga siya ang executive mo ni giganla nato de og unitary executive mga igsoon kay siya ang dunay katungod mga higala nga mo decision sa kining interpretation sa balaod o sa konstitusyon mga higala which is the province of the courts mga igsoon. So, saon man ang Congress unta nga mo tay mo check and balance mga igsoon wa masag kay kauban mas partido mga higala. So sikwati ang demokrasya tungod sa politika mga higala. Anyway, ato ning hisgutan ugma pagtiwas ang mga developments nining mausab no nga mga kalambuan diri sa Estados Unidos sa Amerika. And I'd like to say thank you sa ato mga viewers from across the globe nga nakig-uban sab kanato karong hapuna Daghang kay salamat and maayong hapon kanatong tanan.
The Intruder. Real news, real insights.